I'm Alex Roman, executive editor for Metro Magazine, and welcome back to METROspectives. Today, my guest is Timothy Menard, founder and CEO of LYT, who joins me to discuss how artificial intelligence is reshaping traffic management, transit signal priority, and much more. Thanks again for joining us. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Tim, thanks for joining me. How's it going today?
Hey, it's going well. It's good to see you again, Alex. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you, and it's exciting to talk about Light and all the opportunities you guys have ahead of you, and how your technology and everything works. Let's start there. Can you talk a little bit about the company and how your technology is helping cities move people more efficiently?
Happy to. So, Light's going to be 10 years old here in April, and we've been working with transit now for well over the majority of that time. And so, when people think of Light, or if you were to talk to some of the cities we work with, the first thing they always like to bring up and talk about is just how we really changed the name of the game for transit on predicting these time of arrivals, these ETAs for buses.
Mhm.
And it's super important as people try to get to bus stops and everything. Always trying to predict when your transit's going to be there is super important. So, yeah, we've been influencing traffic lights based on when we think they're going to get there with some pretty high accuracy and precision.
And can you talk a little bit about that 10 years or the majority of that time being in transit? Can you talk about how you've seen kind of transit change within that time frame? Because 10 years with COVID and everything has been like 100 probably.
Oh, absolutely. COVID was really interesting, right, for everybody. And so the nice thing was we had systems on um, pre-COVID, and then to see how the COVID drop, and then to see how we start to shake out and things coming back, right? And how concerns of transit change because at
Mhm.
first it started with just pre-COVID time. It was all about what's my fastest way to work? How reliable is it?
Right.
So we had the peak of everybody riding transit because there was no disruption. And then COVID happened. And then unfortunately, those who still had to go to work, a lot of transit was reduced. And then we lost a lot of core riders to vehicles and they had to
Mhm.
actually drive. And they're going to be very hard to get those folks back because they made that investment into getting a vehicle. Um, and then what happened during COVID as well is there's also the big shift to um, having the vehicle be safe in a couple different ways. Uh, Health and safety safe, right? So everybody wearing a
Right.
mask, making sure no one else gets sick on there, or the buses become super spreaders. But then as well, right, we saw kind of weird times of just an actual physical safety. I mean,
Mhm.
there's great examples out of San Francisco and unfortunately Bart for kind of how interesting some of the years got there. I'll put it lightly, and how much like transit police has really come back, right? So now we've seen
Mhm.
in 2025, we've seen kind of the pullback on are you gonna get sick on a bus because that's been all taken care of. We've seen ridership return. And with that, we've also seen kind of pre-pandemic life kind of return. So, and we've seen a lot more policing come back and such like that, removal of troubled individuals, and it's starting to feel like how transit used to be before the whole kind of COVID shut. All over
Yeah.
the place, right? The downtowns are coming back, people going back to the office.
Right.
Um, and I'll get in front of something you might be thinking about, which is we see it in our data. I was
Mm.
just talking with the VTA last week, and we could see on it was like a step change. It was literally a night and day difference. On January 6th this year, last year's data was like at a significant drop lower, and then all of a sudden, boom, January 6th, everybody had returned to work this year in this area. So all of a sudden, we saw just travel times and everything change. But you also saw ridership completely change and traffic completely change. So it's just super interesting. But yeah, we're now seeing the return to office, and certain cities are
Mhm.
already full time or almost back to full time.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it's also interesting. I mean, a lot of that data shows weekend ridership up as well, right? Is that still that's still a current trend with people using transit to get to events and large scale things and to go out on weekends and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And I think going back to those who love transit but kind of were forced during COVID to get a car, they ultimately don't want to drive. So, right, when you are now going to kind of extracurriculars or things like that, yeah, you are seeing a lot more of that. You're seeing a lot more people fight to keep the transit that we have. And then on top of it, a great case study and example has been the Bay Area's electrification of Caltrain.
Right.
Um, and why I like that case so much, I'm a user of it. I've ridden it pre-COVID, COVID, and post. It's how I get to San Francisco. I refuse to drive there from
Right.
San Jose, and it's wild. The local trains now are like half the time that they used to be before the service, and they run like every 30 minutes on the weekend now. So it is way more advantageous. It's way more comfortable. And to go up there, by yourself or a group, it's a much more pleasant experience. So yeah, Caltrans has just been reporting like significant bounce back, and it's been in these weekend and event times, not just the going to work time. So yeah, it definitely shows there that when you make transit comfortable, safe, because those new train cars, right? Um, there's something to be in. And you know what? I actually got the privilege
Mhm.
too after Transform in Boston. I took the new Excella down to New York, and I don't know why anybody would fly between those two cities. Another great example of how you can go from the heart of each city and in a very comfortable 4 hours. Again, on a very, very scenic and what feels safe and reliable. And like we're doing now, you can work and talk to people. And the cafe car's a bit better than the airport food. So
Right.
all in all, right, it's a pretty pleasant experience. So
Yeah, that's funny. I think that says a lot for what transit is trying to do, which is to make it more accessible to people, make it more comfortable, make it more customer friendly than they have maybe in the past. Um, Getting back to light and your transit signal prioritization, which is also part of that, making transit run more efficiently. Can you talk a little bit about how your solution differs to some of the other solutions that are out in the market and that have been on the market previously?
absolutely. And a good example of this is if we turn our attention to Portland, Oregon and look at TriMet.
Mhm.
And since I was talking so much about trains, and if the listeners and viewers haven't figured out, I'm a transportation person. I do like trains. So to continue with the analogy here, TriMet was first to a lot of things. They're heavily credited with creating the GTSF feed, the General Transit Feed, which is what goes to Apple and Google. They did a lot of first moving things, but bus rapid transit was not one of the things that they did first. And so when they put their first rapid transit line in, the FX2, 3 years ago in September,
Mhm.
Light was Light was afforded the opportunity to come in and be their next gen system. And when we were riding on the first bus out for demonstration day, because Tremet also throws great big celebrations every time they open a new line. Highly recommend for anybody who's interested in that. Wow, Tremet's an awesome agency. Um, so we were on with, the C-suite and CTO, turns over to me and asks, he's like, how do we know if the system's working? How do we know, if the buses are getting trans no priority? And I just asked him, well, when's the last time we stopped? And he thought about it. He's like, yeah. And I was like, do you see how fast we're going? And so what happened at the demo day at the first event try-on is that there's two buses for demo that went out together to open the route. And the first one was prioritized and the second one wasn't. And just the amount of time difference between when the first one got there and when the second one got there was vast. So um, when you can get on buses that feel like you're riding trains where they're only stopping at bus stop to bus stop, that's a huge difference. And so
Yeah.
that's where I opened up on what does Light do and what does everybody talk about first is this predicted time of arrival is The buses, modern systems today, the operations of the transit agencies, they know what vehicles are on what route, what drivers driving them.
Hmm.
And some of these buses have got a lot of sophistication and sensors. They know when their doors are open. They know if they're deploying the ramp for the handicap ramp. And so what's neat about Light system is it's more than just telemetry. It's more than just GPS. We're tracking the buses, but it's like an air traffic control approach where we can see all the buses. We
Right.
know if they're in the bus yard. So from the time they turn on and start traveling to their route, we're already watching what's going on so that when they're getting to that first station, um, that's where machine learning comes in. And that's what builds the prediction is that, over 2 months of data, retraining and self-learning, weekly, this is able to adapt throughout the seasons, throughout the year. And other systems were very simplistic, very set in stone detection based that, if you've been on the road at any time of day, right, you know that, hey, 100 feet away or something that should take before traffic 5 minutes to travel might take 20 minutes because of traffic.
Right.
And so when you see our old static systems, they have no adaptability, but light has all that and is moving away from the being reactionary to being prescriptive. And so we want buses to move through at this speed. We want traffic to move at this speed. So this system is not reacting to, oh my God, there's traffic there. The system's going, oh, we know there's traffic there. It starts at 3:30. People
Right.
heavily use this bus stop and that bus stop. And so the system is making the adaptations ahead of time so that everything's more fluid throughout the day.
Right. And talk a little bit, I mean, because this is what it's doing now. What are some of the capabilities you would like to see down the road? Maybe some things that are coming, a lot closer than usual. Because it's really funny, like pre-COVID, we were just starting to introduce open APIs and cloud-based technologies. And now here we are. Cloud-based technology is kind of starting to become the norm, and AI is starting to come in. Can you talk a little bit about how this technology can continue to evolve and continue to improve reliability, security, all that sort of thing for transit?
Oh, absolutely. First and foremost is thinking about just the use case. So in TriMet's use case that I just gave an example, that was one bus route.
Mhm.
When you start to scale the system, when you start thinking about how to prioritize every bus in a system, you're not really doing transit signal prioritization anymore. You're doing transit signal optimization. Because the question we always get is, well, what happens if there's a second bus or a third bus? How does everybody get through? And so that's where technology like this takes us to, is that you have a full system understanding of how they're all kind of, coupled or working together, so that there's only so much time at a traffic light that you can move things around and maintain safety and real travel ability to everybody. So that's where in cities that are going to multiple routes and overlaying routes where the intelligence of route hierarchy, how to optimize that you can get those multiple buses through in the same band. Those are really neat and interesting things. And so in cities like come back to San Jose and the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, VTA, they are now 29 bus routes citywide. So the city has worked with the transit agency to prioritize every single route in the city. And being the first one in North America and outside of Transport for London, they're learning a whole bunch of new things now, taking the arrows in the front because of how much all of this data and all this performance and all these performance changes are happening at once. So their planners now um, are overwhelmed because there's so much change. How do they correct schedules fast enough? How do they
Right.
identify dwell time? How do you find the overlaps? So as software is making these systems faster to deploy, like everything we've seen in our lives, it now pushes down to the next step in the chain on how do you iterate on those system improvements to the next parts that can be improved and those downwater effects.
Right.
Um, and so, last but not least, you had asked about security. And so, I would say the biggest thing here is um, having transparent systems. Light was built from the forefront of being a fully transparent system where what the vehicles are doing and what the traffic lights are doing and how vehicle influence on traffic light and vice versa is able to be revealed in real time and reporting and um, making sure that now with these systems being connected through the cloud, that there's also very, very secure boundaries, what those are, and then how the security leaders at each firm, plus the cloud itself, Amazon, Google, Microsoft. I mean, the one benefit of off taking your servers out of your closet and putting them into a data center is you just get a level of physical security, and then you get access to some of the best world-class security. So it is a huge step. There's numerous reports out there on just how going to the cloud is already a safer step from having an on-prem setup.
Right. You've touched on it a bit there with the kind of the hurdles and that sort of thing. Can you talk a little bit about how you work with transit agencies to overcome some of the hurdles of implementation, and also how you kind of get them across the finish line into doing some of the things you touched on as far as optimization of routes and service?
I love this question. This is something that I've been speaking openly about now since about the beginning of the year because it's no longer a technology issue. The technology is proven.
Hmm.
The system and the architecture, there's a very good kind of copy paste walkthrough. The challenges that we see, and this shouldn't come to a surprise for any of our agency listeners, is the cooperation amongst multiple stakeholders that we really see is what is the biggest cause of delay in any of our projects because um implementation, we can show examples where we've literally, if everybody is working communication, from a transit point of view, it can be same day setup to get their buses on the system. Then it's just working with the city to get to the traffic lights. And so getting through their IT, we have all of the necessary security reports that they're looking for. So we happily go through those surveys and stuff, which we want to do because we want everybody to be secure. We don't want to have issues.
Right.
That's the whole premise of why you go with a system like this is to reduce headache. Um, but what's even larger than that is just getting alignment from the very start of what the agency and the traffic partners, I'll call them, because that can be your local, that can be your county, that can be your state. When you're doing transit priority, the transit agencies don't own the traffic lights, so
Hmm.
they automatically have to work. And so I like to say a lot of times we're like the Rosetta Stone between emergency services and transit and traffic departments on being able to bring the benefits and the needs of each group to the table and translate how each one of them gets to walk away with a win in these projects. And so the more prep to having aligned goals and vision as you are working to get started, the better.
Right. Yeah, and I would think that's a big goal for you, but I'm curious of how much resistance from the transit agencies do you see when you come in, and how much of this process is trusting that the technology was work, and kind of how soon are you able to kind of prove that the technology works and get that sign off and be able to kind of move forward with the project?
So this might seem a little cliche, but at this point, from the transit agency's point of view, because they always want green lights, so it's not too much. of no, we don't want this. We would love red lights.
Right.
It's more of a how do we get this budgeted? Like, this looks great. You have great examples. What a lot of this is coming out so new because it's now multidiscipline that it's more so like show me the menu, like show me your step by step.
Mhm.
Because it's one part like funding, did we know this was possible? Do we have it allocated? What level is our systems at? Because if you have the minimum requirements, which is essentially you have a CAD AVL system and you have GTSF, and those are both somewhat accurate. And if you can report your fleet locations at like 5 seconds or less, then like you're in a great spot. So then from
Mhm.
there, it's just, well, where do you want to go try this? And then that's what it comes back to again, understanding the rest of the stakeholders. So which cities work with you really well, which should be the first ones you go to, and then also, what is the state of their infrastructure? And so that goes back to again, measure twice, cut once.
Right. Is there an I mean, starting out this sort of technology, I mean, is this something is there application that it's preferable to kind of start out in before kind of expansion? And what do you guys like to kind of set the jumping off point for something when you come into an agency and start to work with them?
It's a great question. And at the end of the day, it really comes to everybody seeing is believing. Everybody's area is a little different. And we are not afraid to, find your most challenging intersections. Talk about, where the needs and the pain points are. Because it's always easy to do something on, a confined environment, whether that's, on your desk or to find, some simple area in the city where there's not a lot of traffic because you think it's just safe. And those are okay if you really need to start at ground zero to really walk through and really go through every step of the way. But if you really are just like, hey, we really want to see the ROI, maybe you've tried other things, maybe you've had a lot of promises before, like we've all been there, right? This is a mature industry. Lots of stuff has come and gone. That's why
Right.
pilots are so good. Um, and so that's what we like to come in and do all the time is discuss, well, let's go find where real pain points are. Let's talk about them. Let's look at them. And then, let's go through small number of, go no-go points on what does success look like for you, the agency? Because that's really
Mhm.
what it is at the end of the day.
Right.
You've got to have a problem. Let us know what your problem is, and let's talk about what the ways are to solve that problem. Because the thing about Light here is that we were founded on not like, oh, we got cool tech. Now, what's a problem that this could be used to solve for? It was
Right.
back on the first principles of like, no, buses are getting delayed. Traffic is causing buses to go slower. Average fleet miles per hour are dropping. Like for VTA, they've lost, I think, system wide like 2.5 miles per hour fleet
Hmm.
wide, which is causing them like $69 million in loss.
Wow.
Like the thing here that I think the public doesn't understand or relish is when you have 500 buses, you're playing with small numbers still make major impacts. So 1, 2, 3% fuel improvement could wind up being hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Hmm.
Or, I know again, I keep going back to VTA because I know their fleet size so quickly.
Yeah,
So
it's
I float,
local. Yeah, it's
yeah,
here.
yeah, that's the other thing I tell people is like, you know, we we love what we do because we live here.
Right.
Uh, we ride it. We pay into it. We care. So 443 buses, and pre-COVID, where we had the last pretty high gas spike, was this like 29 numbers. They were paying 14 million in fuel, and a 10% reduction on that would be 1.4 million dollars. And
Wow.
that's just the capital cost of being more efficient of fuel. Now that goes to brakes. We published a
Mhm.
a flyer, or I should say, like an info page on the other hidden benefits people don't tend to think about of when you get route
Mm.
reliability,
Really. Mm.
um, and schedule adherence like together is yes, it's great for the customer experience. That's ultimately right. We always want people to go on. But then, secondly, think about those who are driving. Think about our drivers. When they have the dependability as well, that they are making their trip time, that means that they're getting their actual allowed break. They're being able to use the restroom.
Right.
They're not driving with the same stresses they had before of right because they know they get ingrained. They too are living the patterns of every day if they drive that same route. So they know. So as they have more confidence of staying within the limit, driving to their needs, that they're gonna have their break, they're gonna be able to get this. That's a massive benefit just in retention, and job satisfaction.
Right. Tim, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and joining the program. I just have a couple more questions here, and I guess it's kind of prognosticating, I guess, the future. But can you talk a little bit about what innovations or trends in intelligent transportation are you most excited about for the next few years?
I think the fact that someone said this the other day when I was explaining it is kind of like, SimCity city skylining the world, where everything gets to come in and we have these abilities now to not just like simulate, and I guess digital twins like the better word for this, but
Right.
essentially there's so much now that you can demonstrate before you have to go to the road, before you have to physically put it down. And we're seeing that even in our own work, that we can do like 95% of the project in a digital space and show like this is how it's going to work on the road with real vehicle data. And I think we're going to continue to see a whole lot more of that. And what I really look forward to seeing is we're going to see, and it's going to have to be this way, more ecosystem playing, more interoperability, more true interoperability
Mm.
between a lot of uh, industry vendors as software from, our typical tech and just every other private industry. This is really coming forward now into the whole transportation space of this interconnectedness, and that's going to continue to make big, huge pushes.
Looking at people who are maybe familiar with the product already or looking to kind of make that leap into transit signal priority or connected mobility, what kind of advice would you give them before coming into a project and looking at this and really kind of examining what the real benefits of it could be?
What we like to tell everybody is come in with a great mindset. So come in with being prepared to be successful.
Okay.
That's been our biggest, and the reason again behind that is because um we strive to provide anything but, and that's because of this curation, right? And so
Mhm.
again, if you're not sure, um ask. And I don't think a lot of agencies are used to working with a, let's call it pretty transparent and informative. I think a lot of the legacy way of working is to go to a third-party consultant and try to get like a neutral stance, but there's so much um change now, so much multidiscipline that bringing bringing your vendors and bringing the people who actually built it to the table.
Right.
Yes, you can still bring your third parties. Yes, you can bring yourself, but you have to have everybody in the same room together. And you can't guess what the vendor's doing. And if the vendor tells you what they're doing, then note that down because you can hold them to that since they
Mhm.
said they could do it.
Right.
Um, and I think that's a bit more of how everything gets better faster is to break these things up and be able to do parts of it. Because again, you might be a monster agency, right? Um, you could be a part of the, top 10 largest agencies. So any project for you is going to be just a lot. But break down, okay, what if we just, you know, did this route? What would that look like? How's our GTF? How's our quality, right? If you just go through kind of a component level of like piloting for, okay, what's the truth behind it? Then all of a sudden, before you even go out to other stakeholders, you already have built your whole case. And especially when you possibly might be going for grant funding because this might not already be operationally budgeted, or you don't have capital budget associated for it, right? So uh, that's ultimately where we've seen like grants be most successful as well, is when you're not just, we have an idea, here's what we think. It's like, we we're going to do this. We've already started this. This is here. We need to go here. Like, here's the cost. Like, that's a much better footed grant because the grantors also want to invest in your success. And if you show them you're already making progress to being successful, you've de-risked essentially these is all taxpayer dollars anyway. So,
Yeah.
you know, people like to invest in those who are investing in themselves already, and it's easy to get behind because we all want to get the biggest bang for the buck. So
Well, great, Tim. I appreciate it. Thanks for the time. Is there anything you'd like to add in closing?
that this was a good time as always, and
Okay.
that if anybody's got specific questions or anything like that, you can always reach out to Light at contact at light.ai, and that's lyt.ai. So happy to hear from everybody and happy to help out, and always appreciative to be on this podcast.
Fantastic. Thanks again for the time, Tim. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.